Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
Welcome back, everyone, to my Hybrid Trends podcast series, and I'm really excited this time because we're actually getting to talk to an end customer who's actually adopting the technology. So great to be joined by Steve from Coventry Uni and dive into the concept of building a hybrid cloud strategy within the education space. So Steve, do you want to just introduce yourself for everyone?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me today. My name is Steve Rogers. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Coventry University. My responsibilities at Coventry are everything that comes from desktop to data center. So I have all the teams from enterprise architecture right the way through to device platform and all the infrastructure that's core for the university group globally.
Excellent. So just a small remit then for you on a daily basis.
Definitely.
Cool. So we're going to break this into three parts as normal, everyone. So part one, we're going to dive into building a sustainable hybrid strategy in the education space. In part two, we're going to invite Matt in from our account team at CW as well and talk about why the partnership approach has been very important to Coventry and CDW. And then finally, a bit of a look at the futures and what we think the technology is likely to look like in a few years' time within this space. So with that, we're going to dive into episode one. And I guess, Steve, maybe for everyone's context, what's the sort of journey you've been on over the last few years that's kind of driven you to this point of partnership and looking at your hybrid strategy?
Lots of technology change. We have gone over the last decade from a very physical kind of central campus based in the city centre of Coventry, traditionally using one-to-one servers for applications. You know, we've had maybe 3 or 4 data centres that we managed ourselves, hundreds of servers, thousands of network appliances all across the group. You could argue with a traditional data centres how you would look at it. There were probably more glorified comms rooms that we were trying to maintain. And we had sort of a lot of difficulties with how we supported them in terms of environment. And, you know, we're not very big teams either. And managing all these environments, which was a mix of Windows, open source. We had a DevOps environment, a traditional infrastructure. And we were just finding it very hard to keep sort of the availability across these zones to the level that the university was expecting. We had some sort of challenges around our estates team who are fantastic, but they're not data center people. So we were wrestling with some of the environmental challenges as well, such as air conditioning going off, broken fire suppression systems, even contractors operating around the areas that we were protecting, like the Fort Knox, so to speak. So we've kind of changed the way we've looked at that over the last decade. And a lot of our line of business has moved to the cloud, naturally. But we are continuing to look at how we develop our infrastructure to be a lot more modern. So we start today talking about sort of sustainable hybrid strategy. We've been on this journey for 10 years. So that 10-year journey started with an original partner, which was based in Leeds in the north of England. And we started out by linking our data centres, the best we had out of maybe those 4, to a physical premises that was just cross country, which we could fail over between the 2 sites. That worked very well, and the relationship was very good. A very professional data center company. They were housing our core storage platforms, directory services, and we had that failover capability we were after. But it still wasn't modern enough for me. I wanted to push on to what was coming next. And with that, we started to see the value and the power in the cloud capabilities. Through partners we are working with Amazon Web Services, we had Microsoft Azure, and we just thought there's more things we can do in this space that is going to allow us to move faster. All these static servers we had and all these physical, big, clunky racks and things to manage in environments, we couldn't respond fast enough to what the university was asking us to. Or if we did, we had to have a very large capital investment to extend what we were doing.
Yeah. I guess that agility is so key, especially in this sort of more digital focused world. We've got a different class of student, I guess, today with a very different demanding on the technology they're adopting, the way they're learning, etc. And you guys need to be attracting them students to get your funding to drive the university forward, etc. So that sort of that changing landscape of the student drives a different demand on the infrastructure. Like you say, that traditional capex monolithic deployment piece probably doesn't support that agility you needed.
Yeah, it was agility and the scalability aspects. And in education, you are dealing with hundreds of different scenarios. You've got particular labs that don't touch your production environment. You might have ethical hacking sort of capabilities that you have to deliver. We're doing a lot of work in sort of the house space where there's the augmented reality. There's all different things depending on the faculties, the colleges and schools that you're working with. And everyone's got their own challenge. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And so that sort of scalability and agility where we were looking at what can the cloud give us is where we sort of reached out next. We do a lot of work with the frameworks. That's pretty much how we engage with every aspect of what we do. And the JISC framework allowed us to look at data centers where we could start to link to cloud. That changed everything for us from that point. Yeah. So we moved data center, nice, clean exit strategy, I like to think. But we went through a whole process of linking our data centers and thinking about them differently. Do you have to have physical data centers in the traditional sense? Or could we do a mix? The mix of we still have our own on-premise that we need here, but how can we extend that through the express routes, the direct connects to the cloud so that we could do a cross-site data center?
Yeah, and take advantage of all that innovation and scale capability in AWS or Azure or wherever, but some of that stability of cost and management from the private platforms or where you need to be connected to legacy systems or local devices, etc. You need sort of that best of both worlds coverage.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back 7 years ago, Rob, I mean, even yourself, what were you seeing sort of education? What approach were they taking to cloud from your own experience? What were you seeing there?
I think it was very much dependent on the leader in that space, and it's quite analogous to the enterprise space a lot of the time. So if we had a leader that was very, we're all in on cloud, we were getting very sort of siloed viewpoints, which was either we're staying on-prem and we're not going to use cloud at all because we've seen a scare story somewhere and we're going to stay away from that, and we're worried about where do our people play in that cloud world because our people are storage and data center experts. So some people were very much, we're going to just do on-prem. And then we had the other class of like a CTO, CIO role that was like, no, I want to get rid of data centers. I don't want anything to do with them. I see them as old and legacy. I'm going to put everything in the cloud regardless of whether the commercial sense made to do that. And I think the last 3 or 4 years has been great to see that balancing of that view and people realizing actually both places have a real part to play in the longer term strategy. Yeah. Both, especially from a commercial sustainability perspective. If you've got a traditional workload or a static workload, chances are a modern automated data center or private cloud platform will give you that stability of cost over a 3 or 5 year period. You don't need to capex it anymore. You can opex them things, which is great. But for any new workloads and things that you're not sure the life cycle of or the demand on, public cloud's fantastic for that. And like you said, you don't need a big capital project. You don't have to wait months for procurement and deployment. You can have that access to that service instantly and deliver the value that the university's after. So I think it's been closely linked to what we're seeing in our enterprise customers as well, and very much about the mindset of the leader of the technology department dictating that direction.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that, really, because I sometimes felt that being in education, we were doing this first. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was several universities we spoke to, but on this sort of scale, bear in mind it was sort of 5 or 6 years ago when we started that, I did feel that we were the first to be trying it. And then I kept going, how are you doing this, Steve? I guess I'm not even sure if this is going to work yet. But we're just being honest with it. But it did work. And we got it, this physical aspect to a data center versus a cloud. So what happened next was we looked at every single workload. So I believe there was about 850 unique services at the time.
I guess a service isn't one-to-one to a resource then. Some services are backed by multiple resources, VMs, databases, file shares, etc., whereas some services are smaller. So actually the amount of infrastructure that sits below 800 services is probably exponentially larger than that.
It was a lot to manage. That's what I can say.
Yeah.
And it wasn't without its sort of challenges of, there was a lot of legacy you were talking about in your response a moment ago, the legacy that we have. And a lot of things don't change because we want them to. We had to tackle like the 5 R's to everything. I think there's even a 6th R now that everyone's had it.
I've had someone even pitch a 7th to me in the last few months. Yeah, so it's like, let's come up with something new just to try and reignite the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and that did work. And that got to the point then where people started to think, you touched on, it's not just about putting stuff over there, all my skills change. It's how are you bringing people along for the ride?
Mm-hmm.
And then we were getting people to go through this sort of 5R exercise on services that they were kind of attached to. And then they could think a little bit differently about how, can they re-engineer it? Can they do it in a different way? Does it have to remain on premise? Can we move it over there, but also move it back at certain periods where the pricing model might change for us, such as like a clearing period or something like that. So people started to get sort of familiar with the cloud platform quite quickly.
So I think there was a big cultural thing you had to deal with within the team, the hearts and minds, etc. Is like, look, just because you're in cloud doesn't mean that your job's at risk or that your service is at risk. It's an option for these people to advance their careers and their skill sets, etc.
Well, I always joke with them, if you don't like change, it's cliche that you chose the wrong job. IT is going to change whether you're waiting for it or not. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have to change your skills, whether it's now or next week, sort of thing. But they were all bought into it, and I think that was important because we put everybody through all the fundamentals of cloud. And if you wanted to take it further, you could go into the associate levels of things. Yeah. And then we had a handful of people who really wanted to push the boundaries and they took it to pro and expert, and that was in-house.
Cool. So did you end up with a team that was doing data center and cloud versus having two teams? So it's like an integrated team, different skills and specialists within that team, but operating as a single sort of entity. Because I've seen a lot of organizations build a cloud team separately and retain a data center team, and then a number of years later, you've got a problem on how you bring them sort of back together again.
At the time, and we still do it in a way because everyone's got a skill domain. You've got a network expert, we've got a Wi-Fi expert, and then we've got a cloud specialist. But we expect people to sort of have enough understanding broadly around what you're trying to work with.
Yeah, so they're working within an ecosystem as a single entity rather than two completely siloed functions.
Yeah, I like to think of it as we understand that you've got the skill and a top hat in a discipline. But what else can we get from you? What else have you got an interest in? You've come into IT and you're an expert in your field, but what can we do next and to improve you and what we're doing together in infrastructure?
That sounds good. So nice long journey, a couple of iterations within that, big focus on bringing the team and the people along on that journey with you, which I think's super important for the success because you're going to get that innovation from that team if they're bought into the vision. So that's really, really important. But you mentioned then that I think that future planning was about that application assessment. You said you had 800 odd services. What sort of insights did you get from doing that sort of assessment and planning piece? What did that tell you? Or what was your takeaway from, oh my God, 800 odd services, what do I do with them?
I think for me, it was just how little you had to run. So people were just replacing like for like because they felt they had to. Well, a lot of things we were lifting up and turning it into a logic app, a flow. All of the servers that we're doing like systematic orchestration were now just a run book. We turned a lot of servers into sort of cloud functions. If I give you a number today, there's less than 200 servers on site.
Excellent. So there are a lot of cloud services that are not VM centric anymore. So a lot easier to manage from a compliance perspective, DR perspective, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, take advantage of services, cloud services that offer you that mothership capability for management. But, the whole server aspect, there's less applications hosted on the servers. A lot of our line of business is cloud. But there's still things we need to do. We still heavily use the Microsoft Azure platform, AWS for certain platforms. And there's still an infrastructure requirement that's local. But that's getting less and less.
Yeah. And how did you find as a final point, something I've seen in other universities, obviously, a lot of times there's a lot of internal integration developed between these platforms by an internal dev team, and that's obviously organically grown over 10, 15 years, and unpicking that can be complex. Is that something did you see that internally, and have you started to be able to sort of manage that unpicking process a little bit?
Yeah, so we tackled that because we've got a monolithic sort of student record system, and I would probably say it's over 23 years old. And although you can upgrade certain aspects to it, we've had to look at how can we break this down to sort of microservices, take away the legacy components. So to start with that, we looked at building sort of brand new modern APIs with a MuleSoft platform,
cool,
which was very good. But even the DevOps team have got their maturity in the cloud so much now. All of that is being moved into sort of an app service environment. So they've built their own sort of APIs. Their learning and development has just improved so much in the past sort of 3 to 4 years. We no longer have to just do a drag and drop component type environment. We can actually build it,
yeah.
And the cost saving is huge. So the service bus is coming back into basically on premise, but your own managed tenancy in the cloud again, the Microsoft cloud.
Makes sense. So that's great to see as well, because we see so much sort of lift, shift, and we'll promise to modernize and never actually do the modernized piece. But it sounds like you've kind of got the team on that journey. And I think that's a great takeaway for me, is bringing the people on the journey, because I guess they're driving that innovation for you then. That, oh, Steve, we could do this with this here, and we could stop having that over there because we've got the confidence to go and develop and build in the platforms. But that's a hearts and mind thing at the end of the day. So I think that's a great takeaway for the listeners, is bringing your people on the journey has got to be super important.
Allow for that ideation as well. Don't just do something for the sake of doing it. Let them understand the platform and give them the freedom to actually come back with some innovation.
Yeah,
because I've seen some of the best things from that.
Cool. That's a fantastic takeaway for the end of this episode. So, Steve, thank you for your time on this one. We'll be back in part 2 to talk about partnership and why we're working together, I guess, which will be great. But for now, thanks everyone for listening. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CW in the UK.
And I've been Steve Rogers, Chief Technology Officer for Coventry University.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next one.
Today's episode. Be sure to for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.